Hi guys, and welcome back to my Money Honey series. If you have been watching my videos before and you are joining me again, thanks so much for joining me and Happy New Year. I missed doing a video last week because it was Christmas Day, but we are back in the new year, and the new year often means New Year's resolutions, and often learning better ways of managing your money is one of those resolutions. So thank you for joining me. If you are new, thank you as well. My name is MelissaJoyce, and I have been doing this Money Honey series for a couple of months now. If you are brand new, I would suggest that you go back to the start and watch through the series, as it will make a lot more sense for you. I'll put a card up here so you can click out of this video, go to the first one, and watch through along the playlist. So today we are going to start to take the first step into the next part of our Money Honey's path, and that is talking about paying off debt. We've gone through a number of steps already about getting our budget together, building our vision, saving up an emergency fund, and starting the retirement savings habit, and now we are going to tackle debt. This is often a very stressful area for a lot of people because we're always hearing about how awful it is to have debt, and it can seem so overwhelming. Today is going to be a very light first step into this discussion about debt. Don't get stressed out. This is not a big deal. Today we are going to talk a little bit about my personal experience with debt, and then I'm also going to talk about 4 different kinds of debt, so you can take some time between now and the next video to think about what debt you have that you want to tackle in this part of our Money Honey's journey. So to start out with my own story, I will tell you about my experience with debt. I, like many people, was not necessarily taught a lot about how to manage money, specifically when I was younger. I went through all of university without having a credit card or anything like that. I had a debit card to take out money from bank machine. I had checks so I could pay with things that way, but I never really had any consumer debt or a credit card to start putting things onto. When I graduated and got my first job, I got a credit card because there's certain things that you need a credit card for, and I started doing purchases on it. But for the longest time I was just paying them off every month. I don't even know if I would put a lot of stuff onto credit. It wasn't a problem. I then decided with my then fiance to buy my first car and our first shared car. I ended up getting my first car loan. And this was back when interest rates were higher, so the interest was a bit higher, and it was a 5-year loan for this car that my fiance and I were paying off together. So I had this car loan, and then that was my first kind of sort of consumer debt, depending on how you think about car loans. We then moved to a new town that necessitated me finding a new job. So I was out of work for a little while, and also because we were in a rural area, my then husband needed to get his own car. So suddenly the entire responsibility of paying off the one car that we had bought earlier transferred to me because it was my car. And so that was okay, but I found that I was using my credit card more and more because I didn't have a lot of income or any income at some points coming in. Then the first job that I got didn't pay super well. I was using my credit card more and more. And it got to a point, and it's funny because these things creep up on you and you don't really notice that these things are happening until you look one day, and I realized I had quite a lot of credit card debt, like thousands of dollars of credit card debt. And it was at like 19.99%. And I panicked a little bit about it. I mean, I had never really known how much credit card debt was too much credit card debt because my my husband had also had some credit card debt, and it was just never anything that I really knew about. So I didn't know what was considered normal in terms of how much people tended to have on credit cards. And I was making the payments every month, and I still had this car loan going, but it was a high amount of credit card debt. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be smart and see what I can do about this. So I went to a bank, and people in banks can be very helpful, but they're also there because it's a business. So they're not going to help you learn how to pay off your debt. They're going to find the best way to get money from you, which is you paying interest. What we decided to do we being myself and the banker, got a line of credit and transferred all of the credit card debt to that and all of the car loan to that as well. And all rounded up together, that was about $20,000 that was now on this line of credit. And somehow in my mind, I thought to myself, well, that's okay. It's kind of like just having the car loan. Like the car loan started out at like $20,000 and now it's just, you know, $300 or $250 or something that I have to pay per month, and I'll pay it off. It's no problem. What actually ended up happening though is that you can take money on and off of a line of credit. So I would think, okay, I'm gonna put extra money towards my line of credit, but then it would get close to the end of the month and I needed some money again, so I would pull some money off of there. And I just found that for a long time, like over a year, maybe 2 years, it was just wavering close to that $20,000 mark. I was not making any progress on it. But somehow in my mind, I was still fooling myself into thinking this was like a car loan, and that's, you know, went with the car. But that was about 5 years after I'd had the car at that point. So if I had properly been paying it off, it would have been paid off. And then pretty much 5 years to the day after getting that car, the engine broke. And it was going to be $7,000 to fix that car. And it wasn't worth that much. So now I had basically the equivalent of an entire car loan on a line of credit, still pretty close to $20,000 on this line of credit, and no car that could be resold, and I had to get myself a new car. And I'm thinking, well, I'm gonna go and get a car loan now, and I'm gonna be like $40,000 in debt, and that's crazy. So I was fortunate enough that I came into a little bit of money around that point, and I decided like this has to change. So I was able to take a good chunk of that and put it into the line of credit, and that was sort of a bit of my kick in the pants to get going. And I decided I was going to get that line of credit paid all the way down. And then when I finished that, I decided I'm going to pay off this car loan early as well, and ended up paying off the 5-year loan in 2.5 or 3 years. And then I was out of debt and have not gone back into it since, because I don't want my cash flow to be owed to somebody else every month. So I have been there. I've known how scary it is. And even when you think something is manageable, when you have consumer debt, it's not manageable, because any emergency that comes along makes you realize that you're already in the hole. And having to add to that is so scary. That was sort of the first epiphany I had about having to manage my money better. But I did it. It's not, it can feel scary. It can feel so scary. And I don't want you to panic or feel sad or upset. No matter how much debt you have, it's an issue of money, and those issues can be solved. It can be easier or harder depending on how much income you have, but it can be solved. It can be worked through, and I am going to help you to do that. So today what I'm going to talk about, as I mentioned, are 4 kinds of debt, because there are certain kinds of debt that we're going to talk about paying off in this part of our Money Honey's journey. There are certain kinds that we're not paying off at this point, and there's some that you can make decisions about. So when I'm talking about debt, there are 4 kinds. There is mortgage debt, there is student loan debt, there is car debt, and then there is consumer debt. And consumer debt is debt for all those other things like shopping, vacations, things that you put on a credit card, home renovations, things like that. So let's get into talking about the first one that I mentioned, and that is mortgage debt. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because mortgage debt is not something that we're talking about paying off as part of this step. Any personal finance expert that you talk to, or almost anybody in this field, I think anybody in that field, would understand that you cannot buy a home, or very few people can buy a home, especially their first home, without having a mortgage. And that is something that is manageable. I mean, you don't want to get more of a mortgage than you can afford, but that is not what we're talking about. A mortgage is going towards an asset that in general, housing markets change, but in general is going to continue to have some value. So we're just going to put mortgage debt completely aside. That is not what we're talking about in this step. The next thing to mention is student loan debt. And student loan debt is something that you can make a decision about. I mean, it is always going to be better to not have debt. And some personal finance experts will say you need to pay it off right away as fast as you can. And I do think that making a plan to pay it off as quickly as you can is reasonable. I also know, and I'm personally friends with, some folks who have student loans that are of a size that if they were to put everything in their life and all their goals on hold until their student loan was paid off, that they would be 5 or 10 years delayed in starting to do things like buying homes, starting families, things like that. And that's not something that they're willing to do. So if you have a student loan that you can pay off in 3 years or 5 years, I think it really makes sense to buckle down and focus on doing that and just get it out of your life. If you, like some people, have student loans that are like 6 figures or higher, then you might want to make the decision to pay that off over a longer time frame and know that that is always going to be an item in your budget. Just understand that it's going to cost you more in the long term because you are paying more interest along the way. And we'll get a little bit more into detail about that in later videos, but I just want you to start thinking whether your student loan debt, if it's something like $15,000, $20,000, $25,000, $30,000, then that is something that you might want to think about really cutting back on your lifestyle and paying it off as quick as you can in this part of our journey to not have to worry about it ever again. The next kind of debt is car loan debt. And some personal finance experts will say you should never have a car loan. Cars are depreciating assets. You are never going to be able to sell it for the amount of the loan that you have back on it. So some people say it's a no-no, and if you have to buy a cheap used car, save up for your next car, that is personally what I am doing because that is how I want to live my life. Some personal finance experts will say that if your car payment and your gas and your maintenance and your insurance and everything else fits into the proper percentage, 15% of your budget for transportation, then that is okay. I will say that if you have a car loan that is longer than 5 years, because they're now making them at 6 years or 7 years, I want you to think about accelerating the payment on that as part of this stage of our journey together, because there is really a point where cars lose their value and then you still have so much left to pay on it and you might end up being underwater. So you can decide if paying off your car loan is something you want to do at this stage in your journey. I would suggest it. But if you decide that you are happy with the amount that you are paying per month, that is a decision that you can make. The final kind of debt is consumer debt. And that is the kind that we are definitely going to be paying off at this stage in our journey. Mortgage debt is something where there is an asset attached to it. Same with a car debt, although it depreciates, but there is still a reason for you to have a car. In a lot of cases, you're going to your job in it, that kind of thing. It's necessary. Student debt is something that you have improved your mind with. You're investing in yourself. Consumer debt, there is no upside to. Consumer debt, in the majority of cases, and I know there are some cases like medical and emergencies and things like that, but in a lot of cases, it is the debt that is from spending outside of your budget and just not being able to rein things in enough to stay spending less than you make. So if you think about it, if you have a chunk of credit card debt like I did, and you buy another thing for like $20 and you figure I'm just going to throw it on the credit card because why not? You're going to be paying for that for years and years and years. And by having debt, you are just limiting all kinds of choices that you can make in your life because it eats into your cash flow. It's something that is always sort of hanging around your neck, and you end up paying so much more for it in the long term because of the interest that you're paying on it and the mental stress of having to think about it and seeing those bills coming in every month. It's not fun. So we are going to get the consumer debt paid off together, and I'm going to talk to you and work with you on how to do that. So that is all that we are doing this week, is just thinking about the kind of debt that you may have in your life, and make some decisions on what you want to pay off. I mean, if you are somebody who has no consumer debt, but you have a car loan, it's a good time to pay it off. If you have a car loan and a student loan, maybe you want to think about really buckling down and getting some additional funds going towards those payments so that you can pay those off earlier and not have those debts on your mind anymore. I am going to put more information in the description bar below, your homework from this video. But as always, if you have any questions at all, leave them in the comment section below or send me a direct message. I am always happy to answer questions of any kind. If you have not subscribed yet, but would like to do so, you can click on the subscribe button, which is probably down below, or you can click on my face, which will appear at the end of this video. If you subscribe, you will see my Money Honeys videos that come up every Sunday. I'm trying to do them every Sunday, and some other videos that I do during the week, which tend to be more product reviews and that kind of thing. And if you would like to watch another one of my videos, or if you didn't listen to me and watch this one all the way through without watching from the start, I will put a link at the end of this video back to the first video so you can start watching your way through. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you had a wonderful New Year's, and we are looking forward to a stress-free, prosperous, and happy and calm New Year. Thanks so much. I'll see you again next week. Bye.